3, 2, 1. Hey guys, I'm Skytana. Thanks for clicking on the video and welcome to a brand new segment that I am calling Tea Time Reviews, because I'm going to be spilling the tea about this book that I just finished and what I think of it. Going to be a new little segment that I am going to be trying out. I think every month, at the end of the month, I'm going to talk about a book that I just finished reading, kind of spill the tea on that while enjoying a nice hot beverage. Today I am enjoying a nice Folgers in your cup. Not sponsored. So I'm going to let you guys go ahead and go fix yourself up a nice beverage of your choice. And while you do, I'm going to tell you that I just finished reading It by Stephen King. Now, it took me this whole month to read this big boy practically. I started it on the 6th of April, and I just finished it a few days ago. So, it took the whole month to finish this 1,000-page bad boy. And I got some stuff to say. I've got some tea to spill on this book here. Now, if you want the too long didn't read or didn't watch on my review for this, I do have it posted on my Goodreads account, which I will go ahead and link down in the description below, so you could go check that out and see all the postings that I'm doing of this book that I'm reading now, Valentine. It's making me want to punch some things, but that's for another time. Right now, I'm here to talk about it. So if you haven't heard of this story, and if some, like, by off chance that you have, I don't know, kind of stayed outside of any entertainment, or if you have stayed outside of any form of pop culture, this is the one about the killer clown, where this town of Maine called Derry, a bunch of kids are going missing and ending up dead. And of course the grown-ups, they're not really doing much about it. That's what tends to happen in Derry. Things go by unpunished and unnoticed, and a lot of weird, very violent things happen in Derry a lot of the time. So 7 kids try to defeat this monster, and then they have to come back when they're adults and try to defeat it again. That's basically the whole ringer-up of the plot here. And now that that's out of the way, I am going to be structuring this type of video dealio here under 3 categories. I'm going to be talking first about the plot, not like a summary about what it was about, but kind of the tools that the plot used in order to push itself or maybe stop itself along the way. And then the second category, we're going to be talking about the characters, not explaining who each of them is, of course, but because in books like this, it would take a very long time to do that because there's a lot of characters. But talking about how fleshed out they were, to me at least, or if they could be better, were they really good characters, were there some that weren't needed, those type of things. And then the third category is one of the more important ones. We're going to be talking about the writing style. In this case, how King was able to scare the pants off of you. Or more likely for me, make you squirm out of your skin. Because that's the feeling that I had through most of this book. It was more like gory than scary, really. So, taking a big old sip of your drink of choice, let's get on with the plot. So it is a being that is from beyond the stars, beyond the cosmos, beyond the universe, really. It is the only one of its kind besides the turtle and this other being that we'll talk about later. But there's nothing like it. It says that it is a world eater to one of the kids when they finally face down with its true form the first time. It's like, I'm the world eater. So whatever that means, take it what you will. But its powers is to be able to take the kids' fear and their imagination and use it as a weapon against them. It's always it always comes in a form of a movie that the kids saw. It's almost always having to do with a movie. For Ben, it's The Mummy, because he saw a movie with a mummy. Richie, when they're down in the tunnels, it's the big squishy eye from the movie he saw. And then, was it Richie too? It was also Richie who saw it as a werewolf too, now that I'm thinking about it. So he helped create its identity 2 times. Good job, Richie. 3 if you count the Paul Bunyan statue. Man, Richie. Man. And then Eddie's was the form of a leper. This disgusting, decaying man. But that's just because he's afraid of anything to do with that gross type of because his mom is overbearing and says you're gonna get sick off of everything, Eddie. Yes, who else am I thinking? Bill's, of course, takes the form of his dead brother, because that's what he's scared of, and it's real sad. Bev's takes the form of her father once, and Stan's is a bunch of dead little kids who drown in the standpipe. Standpipe, not standpipe. And then Mike's was the one with the giant bird we find out later he was being pecked to death by a crow when he was just a little baby, and he somehow remembered that and was able to transport it onto it. So it takes all of that, and then it's like, I'm gonna scare you because I also love eating your fears along with your body. So it always does that. And then there's always this form of stench that comes with it. Like when they're down in the little catacomb area where it lives, there's this yellow smell that they describe wafting up from the ground almost. And that yellow smell takes up the smell of it matches what their eyes are seeing to it, if that makes sense. There's always a smell that comes with it, and there's always a form of pulling towards it that the kids feel. But we'll talk about that in just a second here. So obviously a magic clown being able to transform into anything means that there is magic, some type of unknown power in this whole big plot area of this book here. And that unknown power can either hurt the kids, like when it is using it, or it can help them, like with what I thought at first was the turtle, because there was always these little inserts of turtle imagery, and later to find out the turtle is just a cowardly thing that won't help them. It was weird. So that good other power comes from the other, kind of its mirror image. It has powers like it does, maybe. It has more power over it, maybe. We don't know much about that other being. But that's the one that's giving these kids the good power. Like when Mike was fighting off the bird, he was chucking rocks at it, and then during one of his chucks, he said he felt like there was someone behind him helping him hurl that rock, and that's what ended up scaring it away. Or like when Richie uses his Irish cop voice to chase away the werewolf when they're kids, and to help get Bill back from the soul dreamscape at the end of the book when they're adults too. So the power of that comes from that other good power. But then there's also, like I said, the bad power of it drawing the kids towards them. They always can tell, like, this is a bad idea. I shouldn't go into the house on Niebolt Street, for example. But yet they're being pulled towards it, like they're in a dream state. They don't know what's going on. etc., etc. So it has that power to kind of lure kids in without them even seeing it at first. So it kind of has that power too. And that's the same power that kind of pulls the kids together to themselves, which helps to like, kind of bat home the idea that this other power is the mirror image of it. I think, at least, that's my opinion. And then there's the power of clairvoyance that is used throughout the book, saying that we know that we're never going to see each other again after this, when they meet as adults going down into the sewers, those type of things. But there's one instance where it kind of stands out for me as a kind of, I don't understand why it was used that way. So this is on page 434, when the kids are waiting for the rags to be washed and dried at the laundromat after cleaning up Bev's bathroom. Sure, Stan says. Right. Tell me more, Haystack. Write me a book. He got up and went to the window, hands in pockets, looking angry and upset and scared. He stared out for a moment, shoulders stiff and rejecting beneath his shirt. Without turning back to them, he repeated, Write me a friggin' book! No, Ben said quietly. Bill is going to write the books. Stan wheeled back surprised, and the others looked at him. There was a shocked look on Ben Hanscom's face, as if he had suddenly and unexpectedly slapped himself. So in that instance, where the kids back then can tell what's going to be happening in the future, I don't know if that's needed, or if it helped, or even, why are the kids getting these sorts of sparks of clairvoyance sometimes, but then not able to know when other things are happening or something like that. Just those little sparks. And like, of course, it said like Ben was shocked too, like, oh, I don't know what I said there. But it just feels like it's being interjected for us, the audience, which is okay in some points, but in this case, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It kind of brought me out of the reading for just a little bit, personally. So some forms of clairvoyance I'm okay with in here, because there's some weird magic things going on here. Some things that we can't explain. That's okay. But if the clairvoyantness is being used to throw the readers a bone, like, this is going to happen, and they know somehow, it just doesn't hold the same power to me. So that's one of the things that I didn't really... And one theme that is thrown throughout this book is the idea of a destiny and a free will, if there is even such a thing as a free will. It kind of goes along with that unknown power, because the unknown power of both it and the other is pulling the kids towards the big fight at the end of the book against it, both as kids and adults. So do the choices they as kids make lead them to where they are as an adult, or were they just pushed there by their destiny or by this other power, and the choices they made, they weren't really made under their free will? Kind of those thoughts of it. That's kind of just a theme that goes along here. It's not really explained all that much. The characters don't really talk about it that much, or if they notice it, it's kind of just like a weird, and then kind of move on. So I think it's more for us, the readers, to kind of mull over in our brains, to kind of think about our own lives, I think, personally. But I am an English minor, so I look for things like that inside of big books all the time. So I might be reading between the lines. Who knows? That's my tea on that. And another thing I was talking about a lot here, I've been saying the word magic a lot, which is the only way I can think of explaining it, because that's how my mind has helped me see what's going on with that. But sometimes the use of this magic, both by the other and it, are kind of just a little, to me, overpowered sometimes. And the one instance that stands out to me when its power is kind of, it brought me out of the book like, that's a little too much, don't you think? It's when Richie was looking for Beverly in the Barrens when he was going to kill her after he got the knife from Pennywise and he killed his father. It's just after that. And Bev and Ben were hiding in their clubhouse, and Henry and the boys were like, where are they? And then Pennywise is like, just wait, they're gonna come, just wait. And they're like, what does that mean? So they just wait, and then they see the clubhouse door open from the ground, and they're like, well, holy crap. So this is after that, and they're watching Ben and Bev leave. The fat boy was helping the bitch out of the hole. She looked around doubtfully, and for a moment Henry believed she looked right at him. Then her eyes passed on. The two of them murmured together, and then they pushed their way into the thick undergrowth and were gone. So when I read that, I had to think back. I'm like, where are they in comparison to where the clubhouse is? Like, would they be easily concealed for them? But the fact that Bev looked right at him but then kept going makes me think, and especially when Pennywise told them to just wait and watch, made me believe that Pennywise, through the magic invisibility cloak, he like reached into the Harry Potter world, pulled it out of Harry's hands, and like threw it right over the group of them. And that kind of took me out of the story for a little bit. That was just a little bit too overpowered for my book. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. And it's a good thing he did it like right here instead of like right here. Otherwise I would have been like, okay, this is going to be for the whole story then. And of course there were some mentions of like overpowered magic somewhere back up here, but not as bad as this part was for me. This part like made me put down like look back in the pages, like where were they? That's a point of overpowered magic in my book, this book. And then the last thing I'm going to be talking about under the plot here is, this makes me so sad. It's when we were introduced in the chapter 3 uninvited guests. And I'm like, oh no, things are going to be going down. The first is Henry. He breaks out of his crazy house up on the hill and goes back down to Derry to finish what he started, which is kill the group when they're back in Derry. And that makes sense because Pennywise, it was able to make Henry do its dirty work for it in the past, so of course it still has hold over his mind. That makes sense to me, and I think that Henry was used to the best way that he could have been. I mean, he incapacitated one of the characters, and he helped mirror Eddie to his kid self by breaking his arm again, the same arm that he broke as a kid. I just remembered that Henry was the one who broke his arm too. So that's beautiful mirroring. I'm going to be talking about some mirroring in the writing section. Coolio. But Henry was used to the best of his ability there. I have no qualms with Henry. It's the other two that I am so disappointed in. I have in my notes, have Tom do something other than bring Audra down, and have Audra do something other than being a damsel in distress. When I read that Tom was coming to Derry, I was like, oh, something's gonna go down. And then when I read Audra was coming to Derry, I'm like, there's so many comparisons being drawn to Audra and Bev that Tom's gonna see Audra from behind, smack her with like, I don't know, a stop sign and kill Audra instead. I thought that was gonna happen. Or like Tom was going to, as what happened, I thought Tom was going to be taken over by it and be used the same as it used Henry. But instead, especially when like it started talking to Tom through a balloon, I'm like, okay, he got his orders. He is going to go and murder these people. Cool, I'm ready. But instead, he just brings Audra down to its lair and then dies from seeing its real form. And that's all the reason why Tom was there, really. I mean, and we didn't even have Bev have like her empowering moment again of maybe beating Tom up again for beating up her friend. Like, this is what you get for hurting Kay, and they hit him with a stop sign maybe. I don't know, something like that. But no, he dies. And then Audra, like, it talked to Audra. It was like, we all float down here, Audra, la la la. It could have lured Audra down to its lair by itself without using Tom, thus making Tom like not needed at all. And Audra was just, as I said, used as a damsel. It was a little bit useful because it threw Bill off just a little bit, and he was going a little crazy, but it's Bill, so he was like kind of focused a little bit, maybe. I don't know. I wish that the one that I am the most disappointed about is Tom. If he would have been used better, he could have stayed. But the way that he was used in the book, as it turned out, there was no point in him coming to Derry at all. It was just to build unneeded suspense, really. So that was it for plot. Let's move on to these characters. So as I showed before, I have a character map for all of these glorious characters that were needed. And you see I added 3 down at the bottom because I'm like, ooh, the 3 uninvited guests. We're going to be learning some more about them. And I didn't even have to put anything underneath them because they were used for nothing. The 7 main characters, 6 of which are adults, 4 of which are the only ones that are ever needed. I'll get to that in a second. They all have their unique defining characteristic. Mike's black, Stan's a Jew, Bill has a stutter, Richie wears glasses, Eddie has asthma, Bev is the girl. I feel bad, Ben's my favorite character and I keep forgetting him. And Ben is the fat one. Yeah. Of course, they have personalities and interests and feelings, all different from one another. But really, to me, some of them weren't able to push past those defining characteristics and build a personality of themselves, if that makes sense. To me, some of them, more than others, blended more together with each other than... Let me try that again. Some characters blended together more than others. Like, I loved Mike's story with his father. I loved Mike's relationship with his father. And I watched the movie shortly after finishing the book. And I hated how, spoilers if you haven't seen it, it's been 3 years. I hated how they killed his parents because that was one of the main things that set Mike apart from the others, other than being black, which is really sad, which made his character in the movie very hollow, because in the book, that's really all he had going for him. He had the love of his father, the interest in Derry's history, which they passed on to Ben, taking even more away from Mike in the movie, which I don't get. The movie is by itself, like, cool. it's a good movie, but based on the book, nah, there's some things that are like, but I'm not talking about the movie, I'm talking about the book. And then even Bill, to some point, I think he struggled to try and break free of this gloom and revenge riddled personality that he was given. It took him a while to kind of make himself into a real person. Like, he was the leader, like capital underlined the leader. That was his personality. And it's kind of sad because all of these characters like really could have had so much more. Like when Eddie finally talked back to his mother and like was like, you chased my friends away, you told them to go away, I'm not, no. And he stood up to his mom. That was a very strong character growth for him, because throughout the whole book he's been a mama's boy, and like even into his older life he married his mother basically. So he's always and forever a mama's boy, and stepping up against his mother was a very good character building thing, which made him come alive a little bit more than he has been, which is sad because it happened like maybe here-ish or here, at least halfway through the book. But other than that, those are my thoughts on the main characters. The characters that are kind of sprinkled around within the book, good. I enjoyed it, especially when like I can't even remember his name, and I don't think I have it marked, so I can't look it up. The man who was reading a newspaper on his porch, then folded it up and walked away when Bev was calling for help, when Henry was attacking her. He was named, and the people driving in the car, they're named. And that is totally fine with me because it helps to create the small town feel that this big town, small city has. Because of course everyone's going to know each other and call each other Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, because that's what you do when you're kids, and when it's 1950s or so. That was okay. I enjoyed the naming of those characters because, it's world building, and they all served some purpose well. Whether that purpose was to help push the plot going forward or whatever, or to provide a backstory or a character growth opportunity. You need characters like that, but as long as they're not like introduced for that certain point and then forgotten about right after, like Dr. Keene, he helped give Eddie a growing point. Again, I think Eddie is my favorite character now. Good for him. When he told Eddie that his asthma medicine was not real, that it was a placebo. Now, Dr. Keene had been interspersed throughout this entire book the whole time, so he was not used. Well, his main purpose, I guess, was for that one point, but you wouldn't have known because he played a part throughout the whole book. He even talked to Mike when Mike was doing his research into the town's, all the town's misfortunes that happened. He played a part outside of the part that he was supposed to play, if that makes sense. So some of those characters, very nice. I enjoyed that part. Alrighty guys, we're moving on to our final topic, the writing. Now Stephen King has a very unique writing style, I will say. It's hard to explain, but if you read a piece of King's literature, you know that he wrote it. He has a sort of way of doing that, and it's good. One of the ways that he did in this book that I didn't see, I've only read, like I said, I only read The Shining and 11/22/63, so I don't have a lot to compare to, but one of the things that he does very interestingly throughout this book, and it fits with the theme of tying the old and the present world together, is the transitions between when the older kids, the kids in their old selves, are finally coming back to Derry after Mike had called them. That you get the first chapter of their journey starting to go to Derry. They get that little bit, and then it transitions into their past selves, their kid selves, and we get a little part of the story each time. So this one instance, it happens a lot of places, and I didn't mark all of them because that would be too much. This one instance takes place on 168. We are in the eyes, technically, first of the flight attendant on the plane, but then we transition into Ben's point of view, and then he's on the plane going to Derry, and so he's thinking, and there's like, everyone's violently pushing the flight attendant button because the plane's going through a lot of extreme turbulence and people are getting sick and stuff, so there's bells dinging all over the place. But it's bells at 27,000 feet as the plane breaks into the clearing again. As its motion steadies again, it is bells. It is the bell as Ben Hanscom sleeps. And as he sleeps, the wall between past and present disappears completely, and he tumbles backwards through years like a falling man down a deep well. Well's time traveler, perhaps, falling with a broken iron rung in one hand, down and down into the land of the Murlocs, where machines pound on in the tunnels of the night. It is 1981, 1977, 1969, and suddenly he is here. He is here in June of 1958. Bright summer light is everywhere behind sleeping eyelids. Ben Hanscom's pupils contract at the command of his dreaming brain, which sees not the darkness which lies over western Illinois, but the bright sunlight of a June day in Derry, Maine, 27 years ago. Bells, the bell, school. School is out! The sound of the bell went burring up and down the halls of Derry School, a big brick building which stood on Jackson Street, and at its sound, the children in Ben Hanscom's 5th grade classroom raised a spontaneous cheer. So that's one of the ones where this is the first time where we're kind of tumbling into the past and stuff, so it was a little bit more wordy than some of the other ones, but you get the idea there, where it kind of transitions there. It makes it hard to find a stopping place, because if the chapter finishes off what the last chapter was saying, then you can't really stop there in the middle of the sentence, so you have to read another chapter. But whatever, it was a very interesting flow. It added a very interesting flow to the book, and it fit well with the theme of kind of the blurring of the lines between the past and the present for the group of people here. And I enjoyed it. I know that some people might not enjoy that, and some of the breaks, like the breaks of the italicized and in parentheses that intrude their thoughts, sometimes that makes it a little too clunky, and doesn't sound good, but I like the transitions. They were very interesting. And then, of course, I talked about a little bit earlier all of the mirroring that took place with, like, Eddie's broken arm as a kid, and then his arm getting broken again, both times by Henry, that I just realized. There's all sorts of mirroring things like that. And of course, it has to do with the magic of the other that brought them back to Derry for the second time. It's kind of, because I think there has to be certain circumstances that need to be met in order for their powers to work or something like that. I don't know, but that's what I think personally. And then I already brought this up where Eddie marries his mom, basically. But that happens with Bev, too, where she marries not only her father, but towards the end of the book when she comes clean about who she married, about how horrible Tom is as a person. Bill says, "You married Henry Bowers." And then Bev said, "No, I married my father." But the fact that Tom was able to be taken over by it, not well to do anything as bad as Henry did, but whatever, that kind of shows the mirroring between Tom and Henry as well. So I enjoyed that little bit. And then, of course, there's like the dam building where Ben was able to like build the dam and then take inspiration from the little glassway between the two libraries for his build in the BBC. Little things like that. I enjoyed the mirroring aspects within the book. They were very interesting, and they help, like I said, the theme of the past and the present merging together. Mirroring is a very good way of doing that, and then I think King did that splendidly. So all of these little pink slips here that I have, these are all instances where Stephen King was able to write tension or suspense or just a shock factor well, to me, at least in my book, this book right here. So I'm just going to be reading a few passages that I really enjoyed, and not a lot because I don't have that much time to do that, all of this. So this one takes place on page 340. This is when Richie and Bill are looking through Georgie's old photo album because Bill is like, "My brother's picture winked at me and spoke to me and started bleeding all over the place." So now they're looking through again. So he opened the album with his hands that seemed 1,000 miles away from him, at the end of long plastic arms, and he looked at the faces and places in George's album. The aunts, the uncles, the babies, the houses, the old Fords and Studebakers, the telephone lines, the mailboxes, the picket fences, the wheel ruts with muddy water in them, the Ferris wheel at the Este County Fair, the standpipe, the ruins of the Kitchener Iron Works. His fingers flipped faster and faster, and suddenly the pages were blank. He turned back, not wanting to, but unable to help himself. Here was a picture of downtown Derry, Main Street and Canal Street, from around 1930, and beyond it there was nothing. "There's no school picture of George in here," Richie said. He looked at Bill with a mixture of relief and exasperation. "What kind of line were you handing me, Big Bill?" What? "This picture of downtown in the olden days is the last one in the book. All the rest of the pages are blank." And then a little bit later, that picture, they see copies of themselves in a weird dress, and the clown is standing right behind them. They went to the low concrete wall, and suddenly the clown popped up over its edge, like a horrible jack-in-the-box. A clown with Georgie Denborough's face. His hair slicked back, his mouth a hideous grin full of bleeding grease paint, his eyes black holes. One hand clutched 3 balloons on a string. With the other, he reached for the boy in the sailor suit and seized its neck. Then, of course, he goes to reach in, or Bill goes in to reach in, he's like, "No!" And he gets his hands all chopped up. And then the second one I'm going to be reading from, I think this is going to be it because I'm running a little late, and I don't want to give away a lot more of this. But this is when Bill and Richie are checking out the Neibolt Street for the first time. They went under the porch and went in through the window that was broken by the leper when Eddie was there. So they're looking around the cellar, and they found the coal pit, and they're like, "Nothing's going on here." And this takes place on page 381. Richie began, and then the door at the head of the cellar stairs crashed open against the wall with a violent bang, spilling thin white daylight down the stairs. Both boys screamed. Richie heard snarling sounds. They were very loud, the sounds of a wild animal in a cage might make. He saw loafers descend the steps, faded jeans on top of them, swinging hands. But they weren't hands. They were paws. Huge, misshapen paws. "Climb the coal!" Bill was screaming. But Richie stood frozen, suddenly knowing what was coming for them, what was going to kill them in this cellar that stank of damp earth and the cheap wine that had been spilled in the corners, knowing but needing to see. There's a window at the top of the coal! The paws were covered with dense brown hair that curled and coiled like wire. The fingers were tipped with jagged nails. Now Richie saw a silk jacket. It was black with orange piping, the Derry High School colors. Go! Bill screamed and gave Richie a gigantic shove. So just a little bit of that, using descriptors of the spooky thing that they're seeing. Using descriptors and the sudden little pop of something happening to drag out the tension and suspense of like, there's something coming after him. Very nice. There was a lot of instances where that happened, where there was nothing and then a pop of something. Like when Ben in the later years was back at the library getting a library card, he was hearing Pennywise talking to him, and then all of a sudden he looks up and Pennywise is there, just there. Another spooky thing that happened there, just like suddenly there. And the kind of drawn out, anxiety-filled tension of waiting for something to happen or with something chasing them and you're like, just go, 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 go. Very nice. I enjoyed that. Those were all my points. I need a refill of coffee, which means this tea time review is over. So overall, now that this tea time review is now over, I rated this a good 4 out of 5 stars. Not as perfect as it could have been for some points that I talked about a little bit, but it was a good read. If you want to go through a big book and you want to see what the movies could have been, I'd say read this. If you want to find yourself reading about some really creepy things in some really like skin crawling details, I'd say read the book. But overall, like, if you don't want to invest so much time into it, watch the movies. They're good in their own way. They had to take some source material, but not a lot, like I said. So, 4 out of 5 stars for Stephen King's It. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy, please leave that like down below. Comment, I don't know, how your day is going. And I'll see you guys next month for another tea time review. I'll be popping up interspersely talking about this book that I'm reading now that makes me want to punch everybody in the face because they are just... Enjoy your days, everybody. Goodbye. Easy reading.